All right, thank you so much, everyone. And because we do have a number of students that will be presenting, we'll go ahead and get started now.
Okay, hi and welcome everyone. It's great to see everybody. This is a special occasion for all of us. We look forward to it every quarter to see the culmination of all your work and review some of the findings and discuss some of the implications and hear about all the progress that you made during this very short 10 weeks. So congratulations to all of our UCCS students for making it to this place. And thank you, of course, to our internship hosts for making the experiential learning component of the UC Center Sacramento program possible. So without further ado, let's begin.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Kravitz. And so the format for today is that each student will go ahead and present. I'll say the name of the student as well as the office that they intern with this term. They'll go ahead and do their presentation, and we will take one question from either the internship host site or the academic team. And then we'll be doing an open Q&A at the end of presentations just to make sure that we get through everyone. So our first student that will be presenting today is Claire Brecker, who interned with Political Solutions.
Good morning. Can you see my screen?
Looks great. Thank you, Claire.
Awesome. All right, so my research topic is on lead contamination in low-income communities. My research question is there a disproportionate relationship between lead-contaminated drinking water and the health of low-income communities? The Safe Water Drinking Act of 1986 prohibited the use of lead in plumbing and water fixtures, but pre-1986 lead service lines still operate across the United States, serving tens of millions of people. This is important because the health effects of lead contamination are irreversible, and low-income people make up 42% of all lead contamination-related health problems. My hypothesis for this project was high levels of lead contamination result in disproportionate health outcomes and increasing levels of risk in low-income communities. I focused on a small study of 10 randomly chosen cities in LA County, and my independent variable was the lead contamination data per city, and my dependent variables were the health effects of the contamination. I found that there was not a strong enough relationship between my independent and dependent variables to support my overall hypothesis. And I also found that cities with poor health quality and high levels of water contamination, but low levels of lead contamination, might have other pollutants like copper present in their water. I also found that all cities met the US safety levels set by the Department of Health and Human Services of 15 parts per billion of lead in their drinking water, but 9 out of 10 cities did not meet the US public health goal of 0.2 parts per billion of lead. Further studies should be done on the entirety of LA County to try and answer my original hypothesis, but also take into account other water contaminants like copper. And finally, I would push for data digitalization of public records. It was really hard for me to find the water quality reports, and I feel that it's necessary for future reports. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Claire, for a great presentation. And if there's a question from Political Solutions. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Dr. Butters.
Thanks, Cindy, and thanks, Claire, for a great presentation. I just want you to tell us kind of a little more about each of your figures, specifically figures 2 and 3. So what do we actually see in each of these, and what do the x-axis actually mean?
Yeah, so figure 2 is a scatter plot of the lead detected in all 10 cities and the health effects, which are measured by the US Census data reports. And I use the population percentage of poor physical health. And so my x-axis is the 10 cities, and then my left y-axis is the lead levels of by parts per billion. And then my right y-axis is the percentage of poor health. And there's really no relationship between the figures, as you can see. And then for my third figure, it's the poverty rate per city and the lead contamination per city. And I measured my poverty rate based on the US Census data. And then my x-axis again is the 10 cities, and my left y-axis is the lead levels by parts per billion, and then my right y-axis is the poverty rate percentage. And again, there's no relationship I found, so yeah.
Great, thank you, Claire, nice job.
Great, thank you so much. All right, our next student that will be presenting is Roberto Trejo Antonio, and he interned with the Mexican consulate.
Hello, right here. Right. Can you see my screen?
Roberto, it's not showing full screen just
Okay.
yet.
Not yet.
Oh, there we
Okay.
go. Now we can see it. Thank you.
All right. Oh, yeah, my connection's unstable. Sorry about that.
No
All right.
problem.
So, all right. So, hello. My name is Roberto Trejo Antonio. I'm from the Department of Economics and UCR. The title of my project is "Fear Among a Hardworking Community: How the Future of DACA Eligible Students is Threatened," and a little bit background information about my project. DACA is a temporary fix for 590,070 active DACA recipients, including the 84,413 that have the renewals pending as of June 30th, 2021. As of 2022, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled DACA as being unlawful and has stopped any new applications from being processed. Some of my research objectives: evaluate the impact that the recent ruling might have on DACA eligible students in the future using data before and after the introduction of the program. My research questions include: how will undocumented youth success be impacted by the withdrawal of the only process that permits them of achieving such necessity? Would undocumented youth eligibility to obtain such success revert to how things were before the implementation of DACA? And my hypothesis is the availability of DACA will have an effect on the graduation and employment of DACA eligible students. My methodology: analyze 5 states, which include California, Texas, Illinois, Florida, and New York. However, any further data concerning those states was not completed, as very limited data was available for the students. And then I further went and focused on California, analyzing all UC campuses. And I also included the population, graduation, and employment growth. My analysis: there was a significant increase among eligible DACA eligible student attendance, especially among UCLA and UCI campuses. As the attendance of DACA eligible students in the UC system increases, so does the number of those who graduate and obtain employment. Conclusion: DACA does have an effect on graduation and employment among DACA eligible students. Although my research illustrates a growth in DACA eligible students within California, DACA is not the only thing that may affect DACA eligible students to pursue a higher education. And then policy suggestion is to establish a solid foundation to create a pathway for DACA eligible students to eliminate any negative effects concerning the graduation and obtaining employment. All right, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for a great presentation, Roberto. And if there is a question from the internship host site. All right, then if not, over to our academic team. Dr. Quila.
Hi, Roberto. Could you just put your poster up? Or no, wait, no poster is up. Sorry,
yeah.
I have the thing covering
Sorry,
up. So
yeah.
yeah, just full screen it. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I was just wondering if you could go over figure 3 for us and kind of let us know, tell us kind of what's going on in that figure and what we should be kind of getting out of that.
Oh yeah, so figure 3 is pretty much it goes over the blue whisker plot is the population, and then the orange one is graduation, and then the gray one is employment. So as you can see, from throughout over time from 2008 to 2016, there's a increase within, especially during 2012, which is when DACA was implemented, and that could be seen as a growth between it shows that DACA had an impact among the DACA eligible students and their attendance within the UCs.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, our next student that will be presenting is Sarah Solozano, who interned with the Office of Congresswoman Doris Matsui.
Hello. And let me just, Okay, can you guys see my screen there?
Yep, looks great. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, great, thank you. So my topic is on healthcare matters, a deeper look into the health disparities for minority women and I'm sorry, not minority women, for women in California, comparing rural and non-rural areas. So my research question is, what is the relationship between healthcare coverage and health status for women in the rural counties of California when compared to women in non-rural counties? A little bit of background. There are factors that impact health status of in rural factors, which include like geographic isolation and then limited access to healthcare subspecialties. There was an Affordable Care Act that was passed, which improved uninsured rates of women. However, 710,000 women in California of reproductive age still remain uninsured in 2017. And in 2021, 1 in 12 women of childbearing age remained uninsured. So the graph here does show the improvement of the uninsured rate going down, except it doesn't highlight where these women are, like who are the ones that are still uninsured and what is going on with them. What are these other factors of that? So my hypothesis is that the women in the rural areas of California will have a worse health status when compared to women in non-rural areas because of the lack of healthcare facilities or lack of accessibility to resources, and then possibly because they're the ones that fall into this this group of uninsured women. Another hypothesis, just because of the data that I collected, is that less education attainment at the high school level, high school diploma level, leads to worse health status. So I won't go into every detail of the research design, but I did analyze the 58 counties and collected the percent of women who reported poor and fair health status, their poor and fair health status. The uninsured women per county as well was another piece of information I gathered, and that came from the California Budget Policy Women's Wellbeing Index. And then I measured the number of healthcare facilities, hospitals only, per 100,000 residents, and then other data collected. Here's the rurality rate per county and then education attainment at the high school level. The map here below shows the bottom 5 counties in red, and then they're listed at the bottom there, and all those have a rurality rate of upwards of 90%. And then, so running the regression table, that shows here that there is a correlation also between rurality percentage and uninsured women, and then also connection between what is this? The health status, the rurality and health status as well. And then when it comes to that high school diploma or education attainment and the number of hospitals, there wasn't really much of a connection to health status there. So those were my findings. And then I'm going to conclude with saying that we should create like a health system to expand health coverage to women in rural areas who are uninsured, and then also create a rural roundtable with health specialists, doctors, and community members to keep them informed, and then also more funding for health centers and like satellite facilities in these rural locations. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that great presentation. And if there's a question from the internship host site. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Dr. Quila.
Hi, yeah, I was just kind of wondering in your scatter plot there, I was just wondering what the outlier is on the 0 on the x-axis.
Sure. Yeah, I prepared for those questions. Yeah, that one there specifically, that's San Francisco. So that's San Francisco with a 0.4% rurality and a 4.9% of uninsured. So that's where they're at there. And if just to, since we're on it, the next plot over is Orange County. I mean, the next little dot over outliers, Orange County. So you see it kind of go up a little because the rurality goes from the, jumps from the 0.4 for San Francisco, it jumps to 33% for Orange County. So the rurality rate goes up, and then also their uninsured rate goes up from the 4.9 to the 10.5. So it doubles there as the rurality rate goes up. And then the third outlier up there, kind of joining the group then, is Los Angeles, and there's 64% rurality rate, and then from the source that I used, and then they have a 12% uninsured.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And so our next student that will be presenting is the Hans Sarusian, who interned with the Office of California State Senator Maria Elena Durazo.
All right, y'all can see the screen, right?
Yeah, it looks great. Thank you, Sahan.
Okay. No person should be sentenced to death by the state by the virtue of the design of its roads. Car-centric road design results in the death and injury of thousands of vulnerable road users every year in California and the United States. If roads were designed by the state to promote the safety of vulnerable road users instead of the speed and convenience of motorists, it would be far fewer casualties on our road each year. This and the effectiveness of a road diet can be inferred by comparing a road before and after a road design, aka a road diet. Or let me clarify, the casualties on said road. However, the substance of the road diet is crucial to the effectiveness thereof. It has been noted that, on average, there's a 29% decrease in the number of traffic accidents on a road after a road diet if implemented properly. Road diets should reduce the speed of motor vehicles and reduce the number of conflict points on a road, thereby making it more practical, safer, and attractive to use other modes of transportation. And said types of road diets are typically the most effective at reducing casualties. However, many jurisdictions within California have implemented road diets with little to no outside guidance or with great deference in maintaining the capacity and speed of vehicles on the road in question. As such, the efficacy of many road diets in California is questionable at best. Typically, road diets barely cost more than the typical maintenance of a road, such as restriping or resurfacing, especially when road diets are implemented during routine road maintenance. However, road diets which do not result in an increase in safety for vulnerable road users are not worthwhile due to the capital cost of implementing said road diet and the potential false sense of safety that said road diet may provide to vulnerable road users. As such, policymakers should not only prioritize the safety of those who use the streets within their jurisdiction instead of the speed and convenience of motorists, but should also implement binding statutes which require certain design standards and features to be implemented in all new roads and road diets in order to ensure the safety of all users. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that great presentation. And if there's a question from the internship host site. All right, Jean Marie Gonzalez.
Great presentation, Sahan. Just as a follow-up, if you were to continue this study, what other kind of questions would you want to ask about road diets, or what kind of other information do you wish had been accessible to you?
So initially, I wanted to break down which features of a road diet are the most effective at reducing casualty rates, but at least within California, that data is very inconsistent. Just the small sample sizes of road diets in general limited what I could do. But I would love to know which features reduce it. Like if raised sidewalks reduce the amount of collisions when crossing the street, or if reducing the width of lanes would reduce the speed of cars, for example. But there are many other comparative places you can compare to, like abroad, especially to the Netherlands or the Denmark, where you can see which have implemented these features, and you can infer which of these features are the most effective at reducing casualties. But in California, unfortunately, the data is very lackluster and limited. So I could not do that.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. So our next student that will be presenting is Kylan Chung, who interned with the Office of California State Senator Scott Wiener.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So my research topic is homeless healthcare and mental health access, and specifically a focus on Medicaid expansion. So on May 2nd, Carlos Dominguez continued his rampage throughout Davis by fatally stabbing the 64-year-old homeless lady. To me, this exposed the link between healthcare access and homeless rates, and led to my research question of how has Medicaid expansion affected homeless rates? Medicaid is a program intended to increase the low-income and homeless population's access to healthcare services. And as of right now, 41 states have expanded it and 10 have not. My hypothesis is that the states which have expanded Medicaid will have lower homeless rates over time than those that have not, as a result of the cheapened costs of healthcare, as well as the increased amount of community health centers. My analysis included all 50 states, and I gathered data from 2014 to 2020, measuring healthcare accessibility as the monthly healthcare cost per capita per state and mental health service accessibility as the amount of community health centers per capita per state. I then created 2 scatter plots, which compared homeless rates and healthcare costs in community health centers for the groups of non-Medicaid and Medicaid expanded states. I continued further into separating California and comparing California measures to only the average of non-Medicaid expanded states. My findings were that there was no significant differentiation between non-Medicaid and Medicaid expanded states on healthcare and homeless rates. But interestingly enough, I found that California had positive correlations for mental health accessibility and homeless rates, meaning that even as the amount of community health centers increase, homeless rates continue to increase. As a result, it can be pretty argued that Medicaid expansion is not sufficiently lowering homeless rates on its own. And instead, perhaps we need to look closer and deeper into increasing the amount of nurses working in the community health centers in order to facilitate care to all in our Golden State. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Colin, for that great presentation. And if there's a question from the internship host site? Yes, Ruby Gonzalez Para. I unmuted you on our end. You might have to mute yourself on your end as well. There we go.
So my question is, what surprised you the most in your research? Was there a significant outlier that you weren't expecting, or something that you thought was interesting as you were looking at the different rates of mental health specifically?
I think for mental health specifically, I think California was a huge outlier. And that was honestly part of the reason why I felt the need to separate it into a different graph, is because if I were to put them together, everything else, all the other lines and scatter plots would be super small, but California was just huge. And that's because California's amount of community health centers, first and foremost, were a lot bigger than the rest of the nations, but also its homeless rates were a lot larger than the rest of the nations. And so California was a huge outlier to me, which was surprising, even though we had the most community health centers.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so our next student that will be presenting is Austin Waterhouse, who interned with the Office of California Assembly Member and Democratic Caucus Chair, Mike Gibson.
Hello. All right, hello there. Okay. In order to meet California's housing needs, the Housing and Community Development Department estimates that California needs over 2.5 million more housing units. However, for the past decade, California has built at most 150,000 a year. At that point, is it any wonder why we have a housing crisis in California? And a large factor in this is the discriminatory housing policies and the zoning codes that are often proposed by NIMBYs, which stands for like not in my backyard. And in order to understand this problem, we have to understand, or in order to change this problem, we have to understand it. So what demographics cause NIMBYs? And my hypothesis is that the more NIMBYs that counties have, the more NIMBY counties will have higher income, lower proportion of non-white residents, and lower housing densities. And in order to research this, I examined all the counties across California, comparing their demographic variables to the county's vote on Proposition 21, which was a measure that would look to overturn Costa-Hawkins and allow for rent control across the state. I conducted a regression analysis on these variables, including Republican voter registration, the non-white population in the county, single-family housing proportion, median income, and median age. And the demographic data came from the American Community Survey, as from the US Census, and the election data was from the California Secretary of State. And my research found that the only predictive factor in, the only meaningful variable was the number of registered Republicans in the county. And this means that there is this inherent, ideological barrier to the California creating the housing that it needs. And some future research could look at other states, see if this pattern persists, or it could look at over time and see how this has changed, maybe with the increased partisanship that we're seeing. And from my research, I would recommend, outreach campaigns in order to increase the acceptance of these housing developments and allow for them to be built. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Austin. And so if there's a question from the internship host site. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Paige Pelleton.
Thank you, Austin. I wanted to know more about different dependent variables that you considered to measure attitudes on NIMBYism. Were there other propositions, other measures you thought that you might want to test in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to look at other propositions as well. I've picked Prop 21 because it's the most recent one, and I wanted to also look at like the county level or like a city level votes, because and try and do some sort of case study analysis on those. However, given the short time of the program, I didn't have time to compile all that data. So I stuck with the proposition because that covers the entire state. The entire state votes on that, and there's a lot of data regarding that.
All right, thank you. All right, so our next student that will go ahead and present is Megan Nye, who interned with the AAMPI Legislative Caucus and Office of California Assembly Member Evan Lowe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. Can everyone see?
Yep, everyone can see. You're a little bit low in voice, but
Okay, I'll just speak up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So hello, my name is Megan Nye, and I am in the Departments of Political Science and Economics at UC Davis, and I will be discussing the effects of representation on the high school graduation rates of Asian American Pacific Islander or AAPI students. Bottom line is the student body is diversifying, but the faculty body is not. In California, about 77% of high school students are people of color, while only 37% of public school teachers are people of color. My research question is, how is representation related to the high school graduation rates of AAPI students? I hypothesize that as AAPI representation in education increase, the graduation rates of AAPI students also increases. Additionally, the positive effects of having an AAPI teacher in the classroom may hold a greater impact on students in counties with a lower AAPI population. My theory is that AAPI students may feel a greater sense of support and empowerment when having an AAPI mentor or role model in an academic setting, which may lead to higher graduation rates. I analyzed 50 counties in California from 2018 to 2019 to measure AAPI representation in education. I found the percentage of AAPI teachers in public schools. I also measured the percentage of AAPI residents in these counties to assess how counties with less than 10% of AAPI in their population compared to counties with an AAPI population of over 10%. And finally, I found AAPI high school graduation rates at the county level from 2018 to 2019. Through my research, I found that in counties with a higher AAPI population, an increased number of AAPI teachers was tied to lower graduation rates. On the contrary, I found that in counties with a lower AAPI population, an increased number of AAPI teachers was related to higher graduation rates. In both scenarios, the relationship between AAPI teachers and graduation rates was relatively weak, but this relationship was stronger in counties with a low AAPI population. So while this does not indicate that having more AAPI teachers is detrimental to graduation rates in highly AAPI populated counties, this does indicate that an emphasis on recruiting AAPI teachers in counties with a smaller AAPI population could result in higher graduation rates for those students. So with that, I will leave you with this. In areas with lower representation in population, representation in the classroom does matter.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan, for that great presentation. And if there's a question from the internship host site. And if not, over to our academic team. All right, Dr. Quila.
Hi, Megan. Thank you for the presentation. I was just curious if you could just go a little bit more into, why exactly do you think it is that there might be a greater impact for AAPI representation in areas with low populations of AAPI students.
Right, so my whole theory was that AAP, like having an AAPI teacher would sort of increase a feeling of support and kind of cultural community in the classroom. And I think that if you're in a county where it's highly populated with AAPI, you're more likely to have peers that are of AAPI heritage. And so in that case, if you have like a teacher that's AAPI, it wouldn't matter as much, or wouldn't contribute as much to sort of having that sense of cultural welcoming as it would if you're in like a county, let's say with 1 or 2% of AAPI in the population, you're more likely to not have any Asian classmates. So to have an AAPI role model or mentor, that would be very sort of empowering to students that don't have any Asian classmates to have an AAPI teacher. And that would contribute sort of to their feelings of support and empowerment in the classroom.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And then our next student that will be presenting is Luis Gaitan, who interned with the Office of California Assembly Member Kevin McCarty.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys see?
Yep, we can see, and you're coming across great. Thank you.
Great. Hello, my name is Luis Gaitan. I go to UC Irvine. I'm a criminology major. And here's my presentation, From Parole to Productivity, the Impact of Social Services on Parole Recidivism. Approximately 60% of individuals on probation reoffend within 3 years after their probation ends. In California, California has the highest number of people out on probation. My research question is, how does the presence of different social services affect recidivism rates for people out on probation? My hypothesis is that the more social services a county has, the lower the recidivism rates will be for people on probation. And for my project, I did a large end study over time, looking at 2 maps here. For the visuals, I did 2 maps looking at different counties. There's a few counties missing just because they had reporting issues, they either under or over reported. So I decided not to include them in my study. To calculate recidivism rates, I took the people who were on probation who had their probation revoked or reinstated and added that and divided by the total number of people on probation for that year. I chose 2005 because that's the average year most social services opened up, and 2021 because that was the most recent data I had. And then for my graph on the right, I looked at all the social services in all 58 counties and grouped them by region. I found a website that was able to group them by region. And I was just important to note that Sacramento is separate from NorCal, it's a different region. And same thing with San Diego, Inland Empire, and LA. They're all in SoCal, but they're different regions for this purpose. I wanted just to make sure I can include all the counties in there. So that's why I wanted to put them down. And I was looking at 5 different social services for this project. For my findings, I had mixed findings in each county. Northern California and Sacramento seemed to have the most social services available to them, but unfortunately they had higher recidivism rates in 2021 compared to 2005. And Central California had moderate social services available and had similar findings, higher recidivism rates in 2021 compared to 2005. And then in Southern California, it's very hard to tell because there's not a lot of data, but it seemed to have little to no effect recidivism wise. And then for my research implications, I said that for sure we definitely need more research in this area and definitely need to collect more accurate data all across California. From the different data sets I found, they always had reporting issues for whatever reason. But yeah, and in the regions and the counties that did report, I found an increase in recidivism rates over 2021. So I think it's very important to reevaluate the effectiveness of probation and what it's doing. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Luis, for that great presentation. And so if there's a question from the internship host site. All right, Anthony Reyes.
Yeah, great presentation, Louise. And every case here is different, but is there a particular social service that you in your research found that like positively affected the parolee?
So I looked at different social services as a whole. So I didn't specifically look at one social service, but I would definitely say the adult residential one was the most important one because people on probation and on parole tend to have trouble finding housing because that's one of their mandated things they have to do to be eligible for parole and probation. So I would say adult residential programs were the ones that were most effective there.
Cool, thank you.
Wonderful, great. Thank you so much. All right, so our next student that will be presenting is Yulisa Ceja Cardenas, who interned with the Office of California State Governor Gavin Newsom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sounds great. Thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and share. Sorry. Hey, can you see my screen?
Yes, looks great.
Hello, my name is Julissa Ceja Cardenas from the UC Center Sacramento and the Department of Political Science at the University of California, Davis, presenting my research project, Sounds Like Injustice. Public parks, festivals, and community pools are common open gathering places for friends, family, and neighbors, but also open spaces for discrimination. The use of public spaces has been weaponized against Black, Indigenous, and people of color for decades through vagrancy laws, segregation, and hyperpolicing. In this study, I delve into the issue of racism within neighborhoods and its potential manifestations through public nuisances and disturbance reports. I hypothesize that respondents are more likely to support reporting disturbances to law enforcement when the offender has a traditionally non-white name. Through a survey experiment, I presented respondents with vignettes of possible disturbances and asked about their likelihood of reporting. The experiment scenarios included typically ethnically associated names like Alejandro and Deshaun as the individuals causing disturbances, aiming to examine potential biases among respondents. The control group received scenarios with names not commonly associated with racial or ethnic identities, like Todd or Luke. By measuring the average of responses and comparing the control and treatment, I found that the treatment group's averages were higher than the control groups. As illustrated in Figure 4, respondents' means for my control group were 2.89 and 3.34 out of 5 in terms of likelihood of reporting, while the treatment group averages were 3.15 and 3.56. The p-value for both questions groups were 0.17 and 0.28, meaning that my results were not statistically significant. However, the higher means are suggestive of a pattern that residents can be more inclined to file reports against ethnic or racial minorities than they are against white offenders. Although my hypothesis was not supported, this study suggests that further research can be done in larger groups that more accurately mirror California's population and would allow for more accurate generalization. If these studies produce statistically significant results, they would suggest that the freedoms of California residents of color are largely limited by racism and biases among residents. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Elisa, for that great presentation. And there's a question from the internship host site. All right. Office of Governor Gavin Newsom.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carlos. What a great job, Yulisa. Just wanted to ask, we're really curious to really important work and topic that you researched. As someone with, a name like Carlos Alejandro Guadarrama, just super resonates with me. Curious about how you would improve these results and what next steps there might be. Like, where do you go from here?
Great question, Carlos. Thank you. So I think moving forward, I would like to do this experiment with a larger survey pool. I think that my results were largely limited by the time frame and my respondent pool being so small. I think if I'm able to kind of mirror California's population and also control for race in both my experiment and control groups, it would give me better results, and it would just allow me to find more accurate results on likelihood of reporting disturbances.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much. And our next student that will be presenting today is Kayla Martinez, who interned with the Office of the California State Governor Gavin Newsom's office.
Is it in full screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kayla Martinez. I'm a first year with the Department of Political Science at UC Davis, and my research question is, does the legalization of recreational and medical marijuana decrease alcohol consumption? The National Survey on Drug Use and Health found that recreational marijuana use could lead to a decline in alcohol consumption, while others found that it actually increased it by 0.9%. I hypothesize that alcohol consumption per capita decreases in states where marijuana is legalized. I studied 50 states in the USA and DC, and I used DISA Global Solutions to find my independent variable, the marijuana laws and legalization in the United States. And I used vinepair.com to find my dependent variable, alcohol consumption per capita in gallons for each state. So when looking at figure 2 at my box and whisker plot showing recreational marijuana and alcohol consumption, 22 states and DC, they have a median alcohol consumption per capita of 2.63 gallons. And where they are not legal in 5 states, the median alcohol consumption per capita is 2.17 gallons. The median alcohol consumption is almost the same, so marijuana legalization makes no difference for alcohol consumption. And for figure 3, my findings were similar with the medians for medical marijuana. I found that for recreational marijuana, the coefficient point by serial correlation is 0.23, which is a very weak positive correlation. And for medical marijuana, the coefficient for point by serial correlation is negative 0.07, which is an extremely weak negative correlation. The statistical analysis did not support my hypothesis, so legalizing any type of marijuana does not decrease the alcohol consumption per capita in the United States. And with that, marijuana should be legalized at a federal level and decriminalized because research shows that it has no detrimental effects. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Kayla. And if there's a question from the internship host site. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Paige Pelleton.
Thank you, Kayla. I was curious if you could elaborate or present a new hypothesis for why you think it was that you did not find evidence to support your hypothesis with either the medical cannabis or recreational cannabis.
I think one thing was I wanted to look, if I had more time, I wanted to look at more variables such as cigarettes or more tobacco related things. If I could add more confounding variables, I feel like I could get more research as to what the reason may be. And also I could look at different aspects, health related as well, such as mental health, illnesses, and go more into depth with that.
All right, great, thank you. And so our next student that will be presenting is Michael Navarro, who interned with the Office of California State Governor Gavin Newsom's office.
Is everything working all right?
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. Hello, y'all. My name is Michael Navarro. I'm from UC Davis, and today I'm going to be talking about student learning outcomes. Do violent environments have an effect? So as we all know, the success of every student matters. However, one can say life is no longer the same as it was before for any student because violence is everywhere. 44% of K-12 parents fear a child's physical safety while they're at school. 20% of parents say their children have expressed worry about school safety. And these findings are similar to record high 22% findings following the Santa Ana high school shooting, according to a study by Gallup. These type of occurrences can make an individual ask, how can anyone, especially a student, successfully get by? My research question is, how is the educational success of K-12 students impacted when there is or when there is not violence in the community? My theory is community violence will impact the educational success of K-12 students, while I hypothesize that county crime rates will be related with lower graduation rates and higher dropout rates among K-12 students. For my methodology, I examined 57 out of 58 California counties. Success was measured by looking at graduation and dropout rates, and crime was measured by looking at felony arrest rates made in the 57 counties. As seen in figure 3, there tends to be high graduation rates throughout both the low and high crime activity, suggesting a negative linear relationship. Figure 4 shows dropout rates appearing higher when crime is more common, suggesting a positive linear relationship. Future studies should look at race and income for these graduates, since historically, this plays a huge role in a student success. Furthermore, one should examine more types of crimes within communities rather than just a felony arrest crime. Lastly, I suggest more mental health and family care services and resources in high dropout areas to try to assist in the success of every student. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. And if there's a question from the internship host site. All right, Office of Governor Gavin Newsom.
Hey, Michael, doing a great job over in scheduling. I just wanted to ask you, sorry, could you go over the dependent and independent variables one more time and sort of how you measured them? Curious
Yes.
why you picked those particular variables.
Yeah, so for the independent variables, I went ahead and looked at violence, and specifically I looked at violent crime and property crime violence that was occurring with felony arrest. And then I also looked at the graduation and dropout rates that would measure the student success. And the main reason I focused on those two were because I felt like they were the most prevalent and the most high talked about crimes, I guess you can say, and more common. And because of that, I thought I'd have a larger pool of reports relating to these kind of crimes that would kind of relate or find some kind of correlation to the student success rate. So that's the main reason I chose those measurements.
All right, great, thank you. And so our next student that will be presenting is Andrew Mensch, who interned with the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, or GOBIZ.
Can everyone see that?
Yeah, looks good, Andrew.
All right. Hi, my name is Andrew Mensch, and I'm at the Department of Political Science and Statistics. I'm researching the relationship between air quality and compliance with the California housing element. California is experiencing a severe housing shortage, which is in part due to CEQA litigation. As you can see in Figure 1, air quality is frequently cited in CEQA litigation. The reasoning being that the more housing you have, the worse air quality a city has. I say that is instead whether or not there's a relationship between building enough housing and air quality. That is why my independent variable is compliance with the California housing element, and my dependent variable is the air quality of the city measured by PM 2.5. I hypothesize that there's a weak to no relationship between the air quality and compliance with the housing element. I received the city's compliance with the housing element from the California Department of Housing and Community Development Department, and I measured air quality as average PM 2.5 gathered by the EPA through their daily air quality dashboard. I compared the distribution of air quality between compliant and non-compliant cities, and I found the point by serial coefficient from the cities in the last 5 years. Looking at Figure 2, you can see that the medians between compliant and non-compliant cities are about the same, yet the range for air quality for compliant cities is a lot larger. And looking at the point by serial, Figure 3, the point by serial coefficients for the last 4 years, we see sort of conflicting information. In 2021, we had a very strong, moderately strong positive association between compliance with the housing element and air quality. And in 2022, we have a weak negative association between compliance with the housing element and air quality. From these findings, I conclude that there doesn't seem to be a very strong relationship between air quality and compliance with the housing element, as noticed by the medians between compliant and non-compliant cities being about the same and having sort of that conflicting point by serial coefficients between 2021 and 2022. But we also can't rule out, because of the 2021 point by serial coefficient, that there isn't a relationship. From this, I sort of recommend that we need to expand the population size of measured for air quality among cities and for whether or not a city is compliant with the housing element. And due to this sort of the not certain nature of the data and the results, I would say that we should abscond from conflating increased housing, meaning increased air quality, between, when we're suggesting legislation or for CEQA litigation. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Andrew, for that great presentation. And if there's a question from the internship host site. All right, and if not, over to our academic team. Got Dr. Kuila.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for your presentation here. I was just curious as to why you thought there might be such a big difference in the relationships between 2021 and 2022, why we see such a stronger positive and then a weaker kind of negative there. I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts were.
Oh, absolutely. When you looked at the cities that had in which the Housing and Community Development Department had said were compliant, there was a big, almost like more than triple amount of cities who had that measurement. And like from what you've seen from 2019, 2020, they had the amount of cities that they're even looking at and researching into that were compliant or not compliant with the housing development based on the needs of that individual city was much less so. And I think that as the number of cities increased, the relationship, became less skewed and like and more normalized as the sample size increased, I guess you could say. And that's why we see such a drastic difference between 2021 and 2022.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And our next student that will be presenting is Robert Canola, who interned with the California Government Operations Agency, or GovOps.
Hello, everyone. One second. Can you see my slide, Cindy?
Yes, it looks great. It's not full. Oh, there it is now. Perfect.
There we
Thank
go.
you.
All right. Hi. So COVID lockdown showed us how reliant we are on the internet, but of modern Californians lack access to broadband internet. Wait, sorry, I got like a notification that I got pushed out.
No, you're still
okay.
on.
Sorry. So percent of modern Californians lack access to broadband internet, and that 20% is made up of some of the most Hi.
All right, Robert. So you might want to try going ahead and sharing your screen, but go ahead and turn off your video and you can go and do it that way.
Gotcha. I apologize.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just start from the top. So the COVID lockdown showed us how reliant we are on the internet, but 20% of modern Californians lack access to broadband internet, and that 20% is made up of some of the most disadvantaged communities in our society, with households of color being 1.3 to 1.4 times more likely to lack access to the internet or a computer. My project looks into how internet access relates to educational outcomes, which I consider to be chronic absenteeism for this study. I conducted a cross-sectional analysis on 55 Californian counties during the 2021 to 2022 academic year. I used a variety of control variables, including a county's median income, rurality, population density, the number of schools in that county, and the percentage of non-white residents. As we can see with figure 1, it does seem, my hypothesis is that as internet access increases, chronic absenteeism will fall. And as we see in figure 1, it does seem like it does support my hypothesis that internet access increasing results in declining chronic absenteeism. However, figure 2, my regression, shows that the only factor that has a relationship with chronic absenteeism that is significant, that is statistically different from 0, is median income. But median income and internet access have a high positive relationship of 0.35, and this relationship is statistically different from 0. And I believe this might be indicative of higher internet access being related to better paying white collar jobs, and perhaps families with more income have more time to spend with their children to ensure they actually get to school. I believe that future research into how this relationship relates back to educational outcomes could be very enlightening, and I believe that internet is a quality of life indicator that we should do all we can to ensure equal access for everyone. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Robert, for that great presentation. And if there's a question from the internship host site. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Dr. Butters.
Thanks, Cindy, and a great presentation, Bobby. A nice ironic start, I thought too. It out.
Honestly,
but
we need
I had a question for you. So mine's more of given that we know these findings and you know your findings now. At what point is internet access equitable for you? What does that mean? Or maybe at what point do we all have enough access to the internet and fast enough internet in California, regardless of all these other variables that you've said really don't have a relationship other than median income? At what point do we reach like full internet access and therefore good student outcomes?
I guess I'd use Governor Newsom's definition of this. Back in August of 2020, he released an executive order, N7320, which called for all Californians to have at least 100 megabits per second download speed. And I'd fall back on that definition. I'd say like, okay, when every Californian has that speed, we have equal access.
Okay, and your access right now was, I think you said something like 15 megabytes, is that right?
Yes, so the FCC considers for you to have broadband access when you have a download speed of 25 megabits per second and an upload speed of 3 megabits per second.
Okay, great, cool. Thank you so much. Great presentation.
Great. Thank you so much for that great presentation, Robert. Appreciate it. All right, and then our next student that will be presenting is Elena Gomez Mendoza, who interned with Mexican Consulate.
I'm just gonna share my screen right now. Give me a second. Can everyone see my screen?
We can only see part of your poster, so you might want to go ahead and do a start from beginning or click the presentation mode down below, either one. There we go, perfect.
Okay. Hi, my name is Elena Gomez. I am a UC Davis student. My majors are international relations and sociology, organizational studies. Today, we're going to focus on the barriers from for first generation students and the process of graduating in California. My research focus was basically the access to resources for first generation college students affect the graduation rate in University of California schools. I want to start off by asking, what is first generation college students? Basically, they are folks that the parents or legal guardians have not completed a bachelor's degree. As well, often they face unique challenges with lack of knowledge about the college experience and financial needs. In previous studies, they have shown that California has a large population of first generation college students, and policymakers, administrators, and educators, they usually focus on the allocation of the resources in order to support them. And they noticed that it has helped them increase the graduation rate between first generation students. In this following graph, we can see that since 2011 to 2021, if we about half of the UC entering transfer students and about 1/3 of the UC entering freshmen are first generation students. If we add up the transfers and freshman students, they add up about 82% of identifying first generation students. My hypothesis that I focused on was the more resources given to first generation students is going to increase the graduation rate at the UC campuses. This is because first generation students, like I mentioned, they do face a lot of challenges. For instance, the financial, academic, mental services. So the more resources provided for them, the stress of not being able to graduate on time will reduce. Therefore, I focus on my research basically on the following 9 campuses from the UCs, as well as each available resources that it has on these campuses, and compare them with the graduation rate. The resources that I decided to use were like the campus resources that any non-first generation student would use, and also specifically first generation resources provided for them for students that they do identify as first generation students. I gather my data from the University of California Office of the President, and I focus on the graduation rate from 2016 to 2022. As well, in this same website, I was able to find the campus resources for each campus, which in this website, they provided the resources for first generations specifically, and just general campus resources provided for them. We can see on this graph that the more resources that they provide for first gen, the graduation rate will increase. as if they don't offer as many resources, it will decrease their graduation rate. Therefore, I also noticed on the website that I find my data that they have limited resources for first-gen students as compared to campus resources. They're not as much as accessible. So I concluded that it is supporting my statement that the more resources that you provide for students that are first-generation students, it will help them graduate. But I also can tell that they need to be more visible in the websites in order for students to know that they have these resources available, and it will not prolong the time that they're going to be in school in order to graduate. Therefore, I would recommend the policymakers to raise awareness and provide this information outside just the websites, because I feel like if they're not able to, if the students that they identify as first gen, they're not able to find the resources on the websites, and they would be less likely to find the mentorship and the guidance that they need in order to graduate in 6 years or even less time. Therefore, I would just say that the allocation of the resources provided and accessibility is really important in order for first gen to graduate within 6 years or less time. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. And if there's a question from the internship host site. All right, if not, over to the academic team. All right, Dr. Quila.
Hi, Elena. Thank you for your presentation. I was just curious if you could give us some examples of resources that are specific for first generation students. Are there certain things that they deal with more? If you just give us some examples of how those resources might differ than ones for generally everybody on campus.
The general campuses, the general resources on campus, they consist of financial aid, Office of Registered Mental Services. Those any student get access to. But one of the programs that I noticed that it helps a lot of the most juicy campuses have are the programs such as Education Opportunity Program, which focus on first generation students, and they also offer a program. For instance, UC Davis offers a program called STEP. So that basically allows students that they're first gen to come to campus before the school starts. So they will come during the summer, have a tour, have one-on-one mentoring. And I feel like those type of programs allow students to adjust more efficiently as if they were entering as any other non-first gen student.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And with that kind of concludes our presentations for today in terms of, we're gonna go ahead and stop the recording and move on into general Q&A.